The skies above Africa darkened in a way no one had ever seen before. It wasn't just a storm rolling in. It was something far more terrifying. The sun disappeared behind thick, swirling clouds, and the air grew heavy, almost as if the earth itself was holding its breath. People across the continent looked up, shielding their eyes as a strange shape began to emerge from the heavens. It was massive, larger than any mountain, and unlike anything built by human hands. It was shaped like a spear, glowing red-hot at the tip, as if it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. The ground trembled as it descended, and a deafening hum filled the air, vibrating through the bones of every living creature. When the ship finally landed, it sent out a shockwave that flattened forests and split the earth. From its belly, the alien queen emerged. She towered over everything, her body covered in dark, metallic scales that shimmered with an eerie light. Her eyes burned like twin suns, piercing through the souls of those who dared to look at her. With a voice that sounded like 1,000 whispers, she declared her arrival. Earth was now hers. But the alien queen did not come alone. She brought with her an army of creatures unlike anything seen before. They slithered, crawled, and flew, their bodies made of sharp edges and glowing veins. They spread out across the land, attacking cities, villages, and anything that stood in their way. The strongest warriors rose to fight, but their weapons were useless. Bullets bounced off the creatures' armored skin, and missiles exploded harmlessly in the sky. The armies of the world united, but even their most powerful technology couldn't stop the alien invasion. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. As cities burned and hope faded, whispers began to spread in the shadows. There was an old legend, forgotten by most, buried deep in the heart of Africa. It spoke of one human who would rise when all seemed lost, someone with a power not of this world, a power passed down through generations, hidden in plain sight. No one knew who this person was, or if the legend was even true. But with the alien queen's shadow covering the earth, people clung to the story like a dying flame. Some said the chosen one would be a great warrior. Others believed it would be a leader with unmatched wisdom. But in a small, quiet village untouched by time, the truth was about to be revealed. The fate of humanity rested in the hands of someone no one expected, someone who didn't even know they were special. As the alien queen tightened her grip on the world, the question echoed in every heart. Could this one human truly defeat the most powerful creature the universe had ever known? Deep in the heart of Africa, far from the burning cities and shattered landscapes, there was a small village hidden among towering baobab trees and endless green forests. This village, untouched by time, was a place where stories were passed down from elder to child, where the land whispered secrets to those who listened closely. The people here lived simple lives, farming the rich soil, fetching water from clear rivers, and gathering under the stars to share tales of their ancestors. But even in this peaceful place, the shadow of the alien queen loomed closer with each passing day. In this village lived a young man named Kofi. He was quiet, often lost in thought, and unlike the strong warriors or wise elders of his community, he never saw himself as special. Kofi spent his days tending to the crops, helping his mother in the fields, and caring for the animals. He was kind, always ready to lend a hand, but there was nothing about him that suggested he could stand against a force like the alien queen. The villagers liked him well enough, but when they spoke of heroes, Kofi's name was never mentioned. He was just an ordinary boy in an extraordinary time. But that ordinary life shattered the day the alien queen's army reached their village. The sky darkened, and the ground trembled as monstrous shapes moved through the forest. The creatures were like nightmares come to life. Tall, twisted beings with jagged limbs and glowing eyes that burned with hatred. The villagers gathered their weapons, simple spears and bows, knowing they stood little chance but determined to protect their home. The bravest men and women charged at the creatures, their battle cries echoing through the trees. But their courage was no match for the alien invaders. One by one, they fell. Kofi stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched his friends and neighbors fall. Fear gripped him like a vice, but something strange happened. As the alien creatures turned toward him, ready to strike, they suddenly stopped. Their glowing eyes flickered, and a low, strange hum filled the air. The creatures didn't move. They seemed afraid of him. The villagers, those who were still standing, stared in disbelief. Why had the aliens stopped? Why were they hesitating? Kofi didn't understand. His hands trembled, and he could feel the weight of every gaze on him, but he had no answers. The creatures hissed, retreating slowly into the shadows, as if sensing something dangerous within the young man they had almost attacked. After the aliens withdrew, the village elder, Mama Nia, approached Kofi. She was a wise woman, her face lined with the stories of many years, and her eyes held the weight of knowledge passed down through generations. She studied Kofi carefully, her gaze piercing through him as if she could see something hidden deep within his soul. Then, in a voice that was both gentle and powerful, she spoke words that would change his life forever. "You are the one," she said softly, "the one our ancestors spoke of, the one who will defeat the darkness." Kofi shook his head, disbelief washing over him. "Me? No, I'm just a farmer. I'm no warrior. You must be mistaken." But Mama Nia only smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out an ancient amulet, a small glowing stone wrapped in intricate carvings. The amulet pulsed with a faint light as she placed it in Kofi's trembling hands. "This was passed down from the first protector," she whispered. "It holds the power of your ancestors. The aliens fear you because they know what you carry inside. You have a gift, Kofi, but you must learn to awaken it." Kofi stared at the amulet, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. The idea that he could be the one from the legend was impossible to believe. He was just an ordinary boy from an ordinary village. But the fear in the alien's eyes had been real. The amulet's glow was real. And deep down, beneath the fear and doubt, something inside him stirred. A flicker of courage, a spark of something greater than himself. But the journey ahead would not be easy. To unlock the power within, Kofi would have to leave his village and face dangers unlike anything he had ever known. The alien queen was growing stronger, and her shadow stretched across the world. Time was running out. Kofi didn't know if he was ready, but one thing was certain: the fate of humanity now rested in his hands. The morning Kofi left his village was unlike any other. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the air felt thick, as if the earth itself knew the journey ahead would be long and perilous. The villagers gathered quietly, their faces marked by fear and hope in equal measure. They had seen the impossible, the alien queen's creatures retreating from Kofi, and while they didn't fully understand what it meant, they knew he was their only chance. But Kofi didn't feel like a hero. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with doubts. How could a simple boy like him stand against a force that had defeated the entire world? Mama Nia stood beside him, her old but steady hands placing the ancient amulet firmly around his neck. The stone felt heavier today, as if it carried the weight of the ancestors and the hopes of every human being left on earth. "The amulet will guide you," Mama Nia said, her voice low but steady. "But to unlock its true power, you must find the hidden mountain. There, you will face trials that only the chosen one can survive. The spirit of the first warrior awaits you." Kofi nodded, though fear clung to him like a shadow. The path ahead was unknown, filled with dangers both seen and unseen. But he couldn't let his fear control him. Not when the fate of his village, his family, and the world rested on his shoulders. With a final glance at the people he loved, Kofi stepped into the dense forest, the towering baobab trees closing behind him as he began his journey. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds calling, insects humming, and leaves rustling in the wind. But beneath it all, there was an unsettling silence, as if the land itself was watching him. The first few days were grueling. Kofi had only the supplies he could carry: a small bag of food, a gourd of water, and the amulet that hung around his neck. The forest paths twisted and turned, leading him through dense undergrowth and over treacherous terrain. But the deeper he went, the more he felt the amulet's pull, guiding him towards something he couldn't yet see. As the days turned into nights, Kofi faced his first real challenges. Strange shadows moved in the darkness, and eerie sounds echoed through the trees. On the fourth night, as he made camp near a quiet stream, he heard the unmistakable hiss of the alien queen's creatures. They had found him. The creatures emerged from the shadows, 3 of them, their jagged bodies glinting under the moonlight. Their eyes burned with the same fiery glow he had seen in his village. But this time, they didn't retreat. They circled him slowly, their sharp limbs clicking against the rocks, ready to strike. Kofi's heart pounded in his chest. He had no weapons, no training. He was just a boy with an amulet. But then, something unexpected happened. As the first creature lunged at him, Kofi instinctively raised his hand, and the amulet flared to life. A blinding light shot from the stone, striking the creature midair and sending it crashing into a tree. The other 2 hesitated, their eyes flickering with confusion. Kofi felt a surge of energy rush through him, his fear replaced by something fierce and powerful. The amulet wasn't just a symbol, it was a weapon. With newfound courage, Kofi faced the remaining creatures. He didn't know how he was doing it, but the amulet responded to his will, sending out waves of light that pushed the creatures back. When the last of them fled into the night, Kofi stood there, breathless and trembling. He had survived, but more importantly, he had fought back. The victory was short-lived. Kofi knew the alien queen would not stop until he was dead. The journey was far from over, and the trials ahead would be even more dangerous. But for the first time, he believed he could do this. The amulet's power was growing, and so was his courage. Days turned into weeks as Kofi continued his journey. He crossed scorching deserts where the sun seemed to burn the very ground beneath his feet, and navigated treacherous rivers filled with hidden dangers. Every step tested his strength and resolve. The amulet pulsed with energy, guiding him toward the hidden mountain. But Kofi knew it wasn't just the external challenges he had to face. The greatest battle would be within himself, overcoming the fear, doubt, and uncertainty that clung to him like a second skin. As he climbed the final ridge and the hidden mountain came into view, its peak shrouded in mist, Kofi felt a mix of relief and dread. He had made it this far, but the real test was only beginning. Somewhere on that mountain, the spirit of the first warrior awaited him, ready to reveal the true power within. But what Kofi didn't know was that unlocking this power would come at a cost, one that would change him forever. The hidden mountain rose before Kofi like a giant sleeping under a blanket of mist. Its jagged peaks tore into the sky, and the air around it felt heavy, thick with an ancient energy that pulsed through the ground beneath his feet. The journey to this point had been grueling, testing not just his strength, but his will. The amulet around his neck hummed with a strange warmth, guiding him forward. But Kofi knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Somewhere on this mountain, the spirit of the first warrior was waiting, and with it, the final key to unlocking his true power. The climb was treacherous. The mountain seemed alive, its narrow paths shifting under his feet, as if trying to throw him off. Sharp winds howled through the crags, cutting against his skin like knives. Every step felt like a battle, his legs burning from exhaustion, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But Kofi pressed on, driven by a force he couldn't fully explain. The fate of his village, of all humanity, rested on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail. As he climbed higher, the world below disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. The sun was just a faint glow behind the thick fog, and time seemed to lose all meaning. Finally, after what felt like hours, or maybe days, Kofi reached a plateau near the mountain's peak. There, in the center of a wide, flat space, stood an ancient stone archway covered in strange, glowing symbols. The air grew colder, and the amulet around his neck pulsed faster, as if warning him of what was to come. Kofi stepped through the archway, and the world changed. The moment he crossed the threshold, he was no longer on the mountain. Instead, he found himself standing in a vast, endless void. The sky above was a swirling mass of stars and shadows, and the ground beneath his feet felt like solid air. The only sound was the beating of his own heart. Then, out of the darkness, a figure began to take shape. It was tall and imposing, its body glowing faintly like the amulet around Kofi's neck. This was the spirit of the first warrior, the one who had faced unimaginable darkness and survived. But the spirit didn't speak. Instead, it raised a hand, and suddenly, Kofi was no longer alone. All around him, ghostly figures emerged from the shadows. The ancestors, the warriors of the past who had fought to protect their people. Their faces were stern, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They formed a circle around Kofi, their silent presence pressing down on him like the weight of the mountain itself. Then, the spirit of the first warrior spoke, its voice echoing in Kofi's mind rather than his ears. "To unlock your true power," the spirit said, "you must face your greatest fear." Before Kofi could respond, the ground beneath him shifted, and the shadows surged forward, swallowing him whole. When Kofi opened his eyes, he was back in his village. But it wasn't the village he knew. The sky was dark, filled with smoke and fire. The fields were burned, the homes reduced to rubble. And in the center of it all stood the alien queen, her burning eyes locked on Kofi. Around her, the bodies of his friends and family lay motionless, their faces twisted in fear and pain. Kofi's heart shattered. He wanted to scream, to run to them, but his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen, powerless to stop the nightmare unfolding before him. The alien queen laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the burning village. "You are nothing," she hissed. "You cannot save them. You cannot even save yourself." Kofi felt a crushing wave of hopelessness wash over him. This was his greatest fear, not the aliens, not the battles, but the thought of failing the people he loved. The fear of being too weak, too ordinary to make a difference. He sank to his knees, the weight of that fear pressing down on him like a physical force. But then something stirred inside him. A voice, not the spirit's, but his own. A quiet, stubborn voice that refused to be silenced. "They're not gone," Kofi whispered. "This isn't real." The alien queen's eyes narrowed, but Kofi forced himself to his feet. The amulet around his neck began to glow, brighter and brighter, until its light pushed back the shadows. The burning village flickered like a dying flame, and Kofi realized the truth. This was an illusion, a test created by the ancestors to see if he could overcome his deepest fears. With a shout, Kofi raised the amulet high, and the light exploded outward, shattering the illusion like glass. The village disappeared, and Kofi found himself back in the circle of ancestors, the spirit of the first warrior standing before him. "You have faced your fear," the spirit said. "Now, you are ready." The spirit reached out, placing a hand over Kofi's heart. A surge of energy coursed through him, filling every fiber of his being. The amulet blazed with light, and Kofi felt his connection to the ancestors solidify. He could feel their strength, their courage, flowing through him. But it wasn't just their power, it was his own. He had earned it. When the light faded, the spirit of the first warrior nodded in approval. "Go now, Kofi. The world needs you." Kofi opened his eyes, finding himself back on the hidden mountain, the archway behind him. But he was no longer the boy who had begun this journey. He was stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The alien queen was still out there, spreading her darkness across the world. But Kofi now carried the light of his ancestors, and with it, the power to defeat her. Kofi descended from the hidden mountain, with a new sense of purpose burning within him. The weight of the amulet around his neck no longer felt like a burden. It pulsed with life, a part of him now. connected to the ancestors whose courage and strength he had inherited. The spirit of the first warrior had awakened something deep inside, something that made him feel both invincible and deeply aware of the enormous task ahead. The alien queen was still out there, her shadow growing larger with every passing day, and Kofi knew she would not wait for him to find her. She would come for him, and when she did, he had to be ready. But power alone wasn't enough. The amulet's light had shown him glimpses of the alien queen's strength, and he knew her forces were far beyond anything Earth had ever faced. Her creatures were just the beginning. She had weapons that could tear apart the very fabric of reality, tools designed not just to conquer, but to erase entire civilizations. And now, she knew about Kofi. She knew he was the one from the legend, the one with the power to challenge her reign. She would stop at nothing to destroy him before he could become a true threat. As Kofi made his way back through the dense forests and across the scorched plains, he felt the shift in the world around him. The land itself seemed to sense the approaching storm. Villages that had once been vibrant and full of life were now silent, abandoned or destroyed. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and fear. But Kofi didn't let it shake him. He pressed on, driven by the knowledge that every step brought him closer to his destiny. When he finally reached his village, it was not the home he remembered. The fields were trampled, the huts burned to the ground, and the people, those who had survived, looked at him with a mix of hope and desperation. They had heard the stories, the whispers of the boy who had made the aliens retreat, the one who had climbed the hidden mountain and returned with the power of the ancestors. But they also knew the alien queen would not let this challenge go unanswered. Mama Nia, though older and wearier than before, stood tall among the villagers. Her eyes sparkled with pride and sadness as she saw Kofi approach. "The time has come," she said quietly. "The alien queen knows you are ready, but she will not face you here. She waits in the heart of her empire, surrounded by her strongest warriors. You must go to her." Kofi nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle into his bones. He had hoped for more time, but deep down, he knew it would come to this. The final confrontation wasn't something he could avoid. It was his fate. That night, as the village gathered around the fire, Kofi sat with Mama Nia and the elders. They shared stories of old battles and ancient heroes, their voices weaving a tapestry of courage and resilience. But as the fire crackled and the stars blinked overhead, Kofi felt a growing tension in the air. The amulet around his neck pulsed with warning, and his heart began to race. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low, unnatural hum filled the air. The villagers froze, their eyes wide with fear. From the shadows of the trees, dark shapes began to emerge, alien creatures unlike any Kofi had faced before. These weren't the mindless soldiers he had fought in the forest. These were the Queen's elite, her most powerful and deadly warriors, sent to destroy him before he could reach her. Kofi stood, his hands glowing with the light of the amulet. The villagers backed away, knowing this battle was beyond them. The creatures advanced, their bodies shifting and crackling with energy. Their eyes glowed a deep, menacing red, and Kofi could feel their hatred like a physical force pressing against him. But he didn't back down. As the first creature lunged, Kofi raised his hand, and a beam of pure light shot from the amulet, striking the alien square in the chest. The creature screamed, its body convulsing before disintegrating into ash. But more came, faster and stronger, their claws slashing through the air, their voices a chorus of rage. Kofi moved with a speed he didn't know he possessed, his body a blur of light and motion. The amulet's power surged through him, guiding his every move, turning his fear into focus. The battle raged through the night. The ground was scorched, the trees burned, and the sky lit up with flashes of light and shadow. But Kofi stood his ground, pushing back against the tide of darkness. The creatures were relentless, but so was he. For every strike they made, he responded with the fury of his ancestors, the strength of every human who had ever fought for survival. As dawn approached, The last of the Queen's elite fell, their bodies dissolving into the earth. Kofi stood in the middle of the battlefield, his chest heaving, his body covered in cuts and bruises. But he was alive. And more importantly, he had won. The villagers emerged from their hiding places, their faces filled with awe and relief. But Kofi knew this victory was only a small step. The alien queen had sent her strongest warriors, but she herself was still out there, waiting. She had underestimated him once, but she wouldn't make that mistake again. Kofi turned to Mama Nia, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "I need to find her. I need to end this." Mama Nia nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are ready, Kofi. But remember, the final battle is not just one of strength. It is a battle of the heart and mind. She will try to break you from within. But you carry the light of your ancestors. That is a power she cannot understand." With those words echoing in his heart, Kofi prepared for the journey to the alien queen's stronghold. The final battle was coming, and he would face it not just as a boy from a small village, but as the chosen protector of humanity. The world's fate rested in his hands, and he would not let it fall. The journey to the alien queen's stronghold felt like walking into the heart of darkness itself. Kofi moved across landscapes that had been stripped of life, where the earth was scorched black and the sky hung heavy with ash. Cities that once bustled with life were now graveyards of twisted metal and silent streets. The deeper he went, the more it felt like the world had already given up, swallowed by the queen's oppressive grip. But Kofi pressed forward, the amulet around his neck glowing brighter with each step, a beacon of light in a world smothered by shadow. The alien queen's fortress loomed on the horizon like a scar across the earth. It wasn't built in the way humans understood buildings. This was something alive, something grown. Towering spires twisted toward the sky like the jagged bones of some ancient monstrous creature. The walls pulsed with a sickly, greenish light, and the air around the fortress vibrated with an unsettling hum, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart. The closer Kofi got, the more the ground seemed to reject him, the earth itself trembling under the weight of the queen's power. As Kofi approached the entrance, the sky darkened until it was almost black, and the temperature dropped sharply. The massive gates, made of some dark metallic material that seemed to absorb the light around it, creaked open as if they had been expecting him all along. He stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest, but his resolve unwavering. This was it, the final battle. The inside of the fortress was a labyrinth of alien architecture, with walls that shifted and pulsed like they were breathing. Strange, glowing symbols covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of something ancient and decaying. Kofi could feel the queen's presence everywhere, a cold, oppressive force that seemed to press down on him from all sides. But the amulet's warmth kept him grounded, its light cutting through the darkness like a blade. As he moved deeper into the fortress, he encountered the queen's remaining guards. These were not like the creatures he had faced before. These were beasts, towering monstrosities with limbs that twisted in impossible ways, their bodies covered in armored plates that shimmered with a dark energy. But Kofi was ready. The power of the amulet surged through him, and he moved with a speed and precision that even surprised himself. Beams of light shot from his hands, slicing through the creatures like they were made of paper. The battles were fierce, but Kofi's determination burned brighter than any fear. Finally, after what felt like hours navigating the fortress's shifting halls, Kofi reached the queen's chamber. It was a vast, cavernous space, its ceiling lost in shadows, and the walls pulsing with that same sickly light. In the center of the room stood the alien queen herself. She was even more terrifying up close. Her body was massive, covered in dark, gleaming scales that seemed to ripple with power. Her eyes burned with an intense, fiery glow, and when she spoke, her voice echoed through the chamber like 1,000 whispers all at once. "So," she hissed, her voice filled with a dark amusement, "you are the human they whisper about, the one who dares to challenge me." Kofi stood his ground, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "I'm not just any human. I'm the one who will stop you." The queen's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound that sent chills down Kofi's spine. "You think you can defeat me? I have conquered worlds far greater than this. I have crushed civilizations older and stronger than your pitiful race. What makes you think you are any different?" Kofi's hand tightened around the amulet, feeling its power surge through him. "Because I'm not alone. I carry the strength of my ancestors, the courage of every human who refuses to bow to monsters like you." The queen's eyes narrowed, and with a deafening roar, she lunged at him. The battle began with a force that shook the entire fortress. The queen moved with terrifying speed for something so massive, her claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. But Kofi was faster. The amulet's power guided his movements, allowing him to dodge her attacks with ease. He countered with blasts of pure light, each one striking the queen and forcing her back. But she was relentless, her body absorbing the hits and regenerating almost instantly. They fought across the chamber, their powers clashing in bursts of light and shadow that lit up the dark walls. The queen's strength was overwhelming, but Kofi didn't falter. Every time she struck him down, he got back up, driven by the memory of his village, his family, and the people who believed in him. But the queen wasn't just relying on brute force. She began to twist the very air around them, creating illusions that blurred reality. The chamber shifted, and suddenly, Kofi was back in his village, watching it burn again. He saw the faces of his friends and family, heard their screams, felt the crushing weight of his greatest fears pressing down on him. For a moment, he faltered. The pain and fear were almost too much to bear. But then he remembered the spirit of the first warrior, the lesson he had learned on the hidden mountain. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the refusal to let fear control you. Kofi closed his eyes, focused on the warmth of the amulet, and pushed back against the illusion with all his strength. The light exploded from him in a brilliant flash, shattering the queen's tricks and returning them to the dark chamber. The queen screamed in fury, her body crackling with dark energy. She launched herself at Kofi with a final, desperate attack, her claws aimed straight for his heart. But Kofi was ready. He raised the amulet high, channeling every ounce of power he had left. A beam of light shot out, piercing the queen's chest and flooding the chamber with blinding brilliance. The queen let out one last, ear-splitting shriek before her body disintegrated into ash, her dark energy dissolving into nothingness. The fortress began to collapse around him, the walls crumbling as the queen's power faded. Kofi ran, the amulet guiding him through the chaos until he burst out into the open air. The sky, once dark and oppressive, was now clear and bright, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. Kofi fell to his knees, exhausted but victorious. He had done it. He had defeated the alien queen. But he knew the fight wasn't just for today. The world would need rebuilding, and new challenges would come. But for now, humanity had won. And it was because of one human who refused to give up, who carried the light of his ancestors, and proved that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail. As the first light of dawn broke over the shattered horizon, Kofi stood at the edge of the alien queen's ruined fortress, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The ground beneath him trembled as the remnants of her monstrous empire crumbled into dust, swallowed by the earth as if the planet itself was eager to erase her presence. The sky, once choked with ash and smoke, now glowed with the soft, golden hues of morning, a fragile symbol of hope returning to a world that had almost forgotten what it looked like. But Kofi knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The amulet around his neck pulsed with an uneasy rhythm, its once warm glow now flickering like a dying ember. Something was wrong. Deep within the ruins, beneath the layers of alien metal and twisted machinery, a new energy stirred, dark, volatile, and far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. Kofi's heart sank as realization gripped him. The alien queen might have been defeated, But she had left behind a final weapon, one last cruel trick to ensure Earth's destruction even in her absence. Pushing past his exhaustion, Kofi made his way back into the heart of the fortress. The walls groaned and shifted around him, collapsing under their own weight, but he moved with purpose, driven by a new sense of urgency. At the core of the Queen's lair, where her throne once stood, Kofi found it, the Oblivion Bomb. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Suspended in midair, the bomb pulsed with a sickly green light, its surface covered in alien symbols that twisted and writhed like living things. The energy radiating from it was suffocating, pulling at the very air, bending light and sound around it. Kofi could feel its power, a force strong enough to not just destroy the Earth, but erase it entirely, leaving nothing but empty space where his world once existed. A holographic image flickered to life above the bomb, and the alien queen's face appeared, her burning eyes filled with a cruel, lingering satisfaction. Her voice, though just an echo, reverberated through the chamber like a venomous whisper. "You may have defeated me, human," she sneered, "but my legacy will live on. This world will burn, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Even in death, I am victorious." The hologram faded, leaving only the ominous hum of the bomb growing louder with each passing second. Kofi's mind raced. The amulet's power was strong, but even he could feel it waning after the battle. He had little time, and the bomb was unlike any alien weapon he had encountered. Disarming it was not an option. He had only one choice. Kofi took a deep breath, his gaze falling to the amulet that had guided him through every trial, every battle. It had been his shield, his sword, his connection to the ancestors who had carried him this far. But now it would have to be something more. He understood what needed to be done, even if the cost was his own life. He stepped closer to the bomb, feeling its energy clawing at his skin, trying to tear him apart from the inside out. The amulet glowed brighter, responding to his determination, its light pushing back against the bomb's dark energy. Kofi placed his hand on the bomb's surface, and the amulet flared, brighter than it ever had before. He could feel the spirits of his ancestors surrounding him, their strength flowing through him one last time. "This ends now," Kofi whispered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "You will not take my world." With a final surge of power, Kofi channeled everything he had into the amulet. The light exploded outward, enveloping both him and the bomb in a sphere of blinding brilliance. The bomb's energy fought back, but Kofi held firm, his will unyielding. The fortress shook violently as the two opposing forces clashed, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, in a burst of light that could be seen from every corner of the planet, the bomb and Kofi vanished. The explosion never came. Instead, the sky cleared, the air stilled, and the oppressive weight that had suffocated the world for so long lifted. The people who had hidden in fear emerged from their shelters, looking to the horizon where the fortress once stood. There was nothing left but a deep, peaceful silence, a silence that spoke of both loss and salvation. In Kofi's village, Mama Nia stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. She could feel it in her heart. The boy she had raised, the boy who had become a hero, was gone. But with his sacrifice, he had saved not just their village, but the entire world. Tears streamed down her face, but there was pride in her heart. Kofi's story would be told for generations, his name remembered as the human who stood against the impossible and won. The amulet, now dim but whole, was found days later, resting in the center of the crater where the fortress had once stood. It was brought back to the village, where it was placed in a sacred shrine, a symbol of Kofi's courage and the light he had brought to the world. People from all over came to see it, to hear the story of the boy who had faced the alien queen and sacrificed everything to save them. But those closest to Kofi knew the truth. His spirit had not truly left. It lived on in the hearts of every person he had saved, in the land he had protected, and in the sky that now shone a little brighter because of him. His journey had ended, but his legacy would never fade. For as long as humanity existed, they would remember the boy who had carried the light of his ancestors, who had stood alone against the darkness, and proved that even in the face of the universe's greatest evil, only one human was enough to make a difference.